India is a big country and plays a big role in terms of changing the statistics, either positively or negatively, in terms of the global figures. A couple of months back, the FAO chief economist, when he presented in Ethiopia at the UNFSS +4, he said that the report of the SOFI this year is about price fluctuations and price variability. And he said that actually improvements in India has led to an improvement in global figures in terms of affordability. So I'm very delighted to be here, along with my co-commissioners Ramanan Laxminarayan, who's here, and also Daniel Maison de Cruz, who's at Cornell, and he's joining us online, and two of our youth fellows, Costanza Conti and Sumati Bajaj, and you'll hear from all of them as we go along. Next slide, please. So I think this is really the mission or the statement or the vision statement of the EAT-Lancet Commission, what it was asked to do in terms of what needs to change in the world, which directions do we need to take in order to provide healthy food accessible to all. I think the all and the justice element was very crucial this time, produced, processed, distributed, and consumed fairly within planetary boundaries. Next, please. These are the 5 sections of the report, and we'll take you through all the 5 starting with health, environment, justice, modeling, and transformations. Next, previous. Yeah. This is just a view of the 24 commissioners. The EAT-Lancet Commission was an independent commission of the Lancet and EAT Foundation. It had 24 commissioners from all parts of the world, about 12 youth fellows, and more than 50 authors or co-authors on the report. So it's been a huge scientific exercise over the last 3 years. So I think just to frame, as I said at the start, I think Dr. Ramesh Chand is not here yet, but he will be here. He's the convener of the National Food Systems Transformation Pathway on behalf of the Niti Aayog. And of course, the whole purpose of the food systems transformation is to have a more healthy, sustainable, and just national pathway. And I think today we are trying to see how we can actually work with all of you to look at the global figures, to look at what the science says, and how can we move ahead. Just some figures to start off with. On the positive side, actually the food systems dashboard collects a lot of evidence on about more than 50, 60, actually 150 variables. And when we look at those figures, we find that in some figures across these, like cost of a healthy diet, actually India is doing pretty well. And this is because of many of our policies like procurement, MSP, public distribution system, many policies which are in place, which are really helping to make diets affordable. Also, though this pesticide is a slightly controversial issue because I think we are over-consuming pesticides, but from the global level, when we look at a global level, the per acre pesticide use is quite low. And also, of course, India has very good social protection coverage, not just with PDS, but also with Mahatma Gandhi, Nariga, and other such programs, even though they may not be adequate, but they are nevertheless there. On the lagging side, I think in global terms, we find that we still have a shortage in terms of vegetable and fruit consumption. I think our agriculture is still drawing 70% of all freshwater resources and also contributing substantially 30% to greenhouse gas emissions. And from a justice lens, we know that in India, a majority of farmers are women, yet the share of women amongst owners and right bearers of agricultural land, etc., is very poor. Next, please. So I'll move on briefly to the main findings from the healthy diet, on the healthy diet section, and what the analysis shows us. This across all regions, there is a common shortfall in terms of fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, and whole grains. In some places, not in India, the diets have excess of meat, dairy, animal fats, sugar, and excessively processed foods. So building on the existing data, the Commission 2025, we have actually strengthened the evidence in terms of the benefits of what has been called as the planetary health diet, which really sets out recommendations for healthy diets that ensure nutritional adequacy, support optimal health outcomes. This is the key purpose, of course, and can also be adapted. It's very flexible, can be adapted to different contexts and cultures. So this is really what the EAT-Lancet, or what we call as the planetary health diet, looks like. The tables present the range of recommended intake per food group for a healthy dietary intake. It is totally flexible on what specific foods you choose within each food group. So I think the idea is that the planetary health diet is really a diet of choice, which includes abundance of fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, and whole grains, while still allowing moderate intakes of meat and dairy. So it's an aspirational diet based on diversity, which accommodates different cultures and eating patterns. This is from the global, just an example. I don't have time to go through all the food groups, but if we take an example on fruits and vegetables, for the global, which also has the regional breakup, you will see that except for East Asia and the Pacific, which is over-consuming more than the requirement of fruits and vegetables, but most other regions are under-consuming. Next, please. This is specific figures for India, which have been calculated by Sumati along with our commissioner colleague Marco Springman, based at the University College London. And I think the top one shows the baseline, what is our current consumption, and the bottom bar shows the planetary health diet and what would be the changes. And as you can very clearly see, the yellow and the red is basically wheat, rice, etc. In the planetary health diet, we need to reduce somewhat the consumption of that. The greens are the vegetables, fruits, legumes, particularly legumes, and nuts and seeds, which need to increase a lot. So we need to really improve the production of that. The grays are the oils, yeah. So compared the different oils, which is fine. And I think other things here, which is the milk, eggs, meat, etc. India is more or less at the level of the global recommendation. Of course, there are distributional inequalities that not everyone gets it. But I think if we look at an India national level, and this part, the main changes are between the grains and the fruits and vegetables. Next, please. I think this was again from our, the study found that this is actually a cohort study based in the United States, which actually found that when you move in different deciles towards the planetary health diet, there is a reduction in mortality. So those who are in the final decile, actually there's almost a 28% reduction in total mortality with greater adherence to the diet. Next, please. And again, for India, the figures are very similar. The total reduction in mortality is almost 15% because of a shift to a planetary health diet. And the biggest decline is in terms of chronic heart disease. But I think recent evidence also shows that respiratory disease can also be improved by shifting to a planetary health diet. I think the bottom one shows the different risk factors and the mitigating factors, and as you can see again, the greens, the legumes, fruits, vegetables, they play a big role in terms of mitigating these risks. Okay, so that's just a snapshot of the diets, and I would now like to request my colleague Ramanan to come and present some of the data on the environment.
And Ajay for organizing all of this. So we have now the planetary health diet, and the question is how you can produce it in an environmentally sustainable way, which is able to meet the 9 planetary boundaries, which is a framework that defines the 9 Earth system processes that regulate life on Earth with respect to the food system. Now, as you all know, agriculture itself contributes about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, and the light green here shows the contribution of agriculture in the context of breaching these planetary boundaries, which these are the safe boundaries, and obviously we've breached some of these significantly. One that we've added this time is the pesticides and antimicrobial use, particularly, in agriculture. And this is a situation where if we continue to do it, we absolutely will not be able to maintain the effectiveness of antibiotics for disease treatment. So that's that light green. Now, food systems also, are the largest contributors of 5 of these 9 transgressions, as you can see. So even as an individual, contributor, it's pretty significant. And they're the dominant cause of biodiversity loss, the largest consumer of fresh water, the largest cause of deforestation, and loss of intact agriculture, intact nature. So the question is, what do we have to do now in order to meet the planetary health diet, but at the same time not transgress these boundaries? Now, keep in mind that these issues are very relevant for India, because we're a country where more than half the population is either directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. We're a tropical country and highly sustainable climate variation. So anything that happens on the climate front has blowback for more than half the country. So I don't think this is something we want to say, oh, but they pollute more, we pollute less, sort of thing. We are directly affected by what we do here. And I think that these are opportunities for us to fix the system. And if we're able to do it, then we can make some progress here. Next slide, please. So if you look at the next couple of slides at the global numbers on these high resolution maps, and this particular map is on the pesticide risk, as Nitya said. India is not necessarily the highest consumer in terms of per acre pesticide use. It depends on how you sort of see it. Some people might see it as, well, we really should be using more, but actually it contributes a lot to health risks as well. And we really want to be able to see if we can find a pathway. We're in a moment of crossroads here where we can go in a direction of not paying attention to these boundaries, but we will be affected the most. Or we can actually pay attention to these and change the way in which we really do agriculture. And the red countries are the ones you see, parts of China, parts of South America, where there are really high levels of pesticide pollution, which then of course doesn't stay just on the crops. It goes back into the water and then gets into people as well. Next slide. So if you look at nitrogen surplus, and remember, there's only a limited amount of nitrogen which we're able to fix from the atmosphere. And as you all know, it's a critical part of agriculture. But this nitrogen is not shared equally around the world. There's a huge nitrogen inequality here, and we are part of that nitrogen inequality. You can see that red part right there. So this is not necessarily to say we want to solve the entire thing just through fertilizer use, but keep in mind that we actually consume much less of this than many other parts of the world do. The US, certainly Europe, and also in other parts of the world. So how do you share, the fixed nitrogen budget across, and small-scale farmers in Africa are also underutilizing, sorry, I said it wrong. China and India are overusing nitrogen, and the other parts are underusing. So that's the equity question. Sorry for that. The next slide is on intact nature. And we've transitioned from 50% of nature on land into unsustainable management of our ecosystems. So the red areas here that are lost so much of the ecological functioning, from pollination to organic carbon sequestration in the soils, that we have an unsustainable situation. And of course, India is in that situation. Parts of China is also there, and parts of Latin America also here. So I think we do have a choice to make in terms of how we go forward in agriculture. Next slide. So we have sustainable environmental practices which we have the potential to mitigate these planetary boundaries and transgressions without negatively affecting yields. So they include measures like, and this is what the report talks about, reduction of input dependence, which again was useful at a particular point in time, but now it's a question. Strengthening soil and water management, scale conservation agriculture, micro irrigation, integrated nutrient management. And last is promoting crop diversification. So there was a very interesting study that just came out today, which showed that the one country in the world that was able to meet all of its food groups entirely domestically by itself was Guyana. Now, Guyana is a country with only very little land for agriculture, 5%, 95% is the Amazon rainforest. But the fact that they're able to do it makes a very important point. We should not equate land under cultivation with our ability to feed ourselves. These are completely separate things, and we can feed ourselves with much less land being used if we do it the right way. So I'll turn over next to, you're coming back, for the Justice.
Please do keep your questions and comments and suggestions we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So the new element of the EAT-Lancet Commission in 2025 was the adding of a justice dimension, to realize that, of course, these are the healthy diets within planetary boundaries, but who gets what, who doesn't get what, how are these things distributed, is it fair, is it not fair? And we really felt that this was a very critical pillar of food systems transformation. First of all, because justice is important in and of itself. All citizens have a basic right to healthy food. And if we don't take this into account, our food system then, of course, not just fails the planet, as Ramanan just said, but also fails us as a people. And the second is that justice is also very important to be able to make the food system transformation that we need. So in this commission, in addition to establishing what a healthy diet is and what the food system share of planetary boundaries is, we also established what a just food system would look like. It was a very collaborative effort because it was the first time we were doing this, and we really lent on human rights to guide us. For instance, the right to food, and India, of course, has the right to food under the National Food Security Act of 2013, but we also looked at other rights, the right to decent work, so a living wage, and the right to a healthy environment. And within justice, we said that we use sort of conceptual thinkings around justice, which really talk about the different dimensions of justice, about recognizing who are the people who have, who don't have, about what can we do to redistribute. And I think the Indian government in particular has been doing a lot with social protection and other measures. And the third very important one is in terms of representation and voice. Whose needs, whose priorities are feeding into, do we listen to the farmers? Do we take what their priorities are when we are making policies around it? So next, please. So we started off this process. Of course, as you've heard, there's lots of indicators available. But to start off this justice element in line with the other two sections, we picked selectively for this initial report, for this first report of the commission which had justice in it, 2 indicators for each component, each of the rights. So the right to food, the right to decent work, and the right to a clean environment. So for the right to food, which is the first one, we have 2 indicators. One is an affordable, healthy diet, because we know globally that a lot of people, I think 2 billion people are not able to afford, or large number of people are not able to afford a healthy diet. I think in India, as I said at the start, this is slightly better because in terms of food security, because of our public distribution system, that people are food secure, but still a lot of people are not able to afford a healthy diet. And the second, I think almost 30%. And the second one is about the healthy environment. And this has been a matter of big debate, that, what is being sold, what is available to us to eat. We have the NCDs, of course, in terms of obesity, overweight, and various kinds of things, because people are eating junk food. Even those who have option to eat healthy food are eating junk food. But at the same time, a lot of poor people don't have an option for healthy food because the ultra-processed food, even I have been to remote areas in Uttarakhand. In every village you will find Coca-Cola and you will find Maggi noodles. And women feel that there is no time to cook a full meal. They are very busy. The men are all migrating to Delhi and other places. So they end up eating this kind of food. So I think there's a huge problem in terms of the food environment. And here we took the indicator of availability of sugar-sweetened beverages as a global indicator. Next, please. The second dimension on the right to a clean environment, we had 2 indicators here. One is a safe climate, and this we use WHO guidelines in terms of 29 degrees temperature, especially for resting and sleep. And I think we are way above in India that temperature indicator. People don't have. Those who can afford it, of course, have air conditioning and cooling systems, but a lot of our poor people don't have access to this. And the second one was related to the non-toxic environment. And I think here we took the indicator of, as Ramanan said, nitrogen and nitrogen leaching into drinking water. And again, we found that this is a huge problem for India. So if we look at this map, the dark brown colors are really where it is below the just limit, and we see that a lot of India is within the dark brown element where there is high levels of nitrogen leaching into drinking water. Next, please. And the final one is around decent work, and this we took, first of all, the living wage, what is the wage, and secondly, meaningful representation. And here again, we find that because of Mahatma Gandhi Nariga and other such social protection measures, actually India has done well in terms of keeping up, to some degree at least, providing people with the income that they need to purchase food, even with food inflation. But the second element, in terms of meaningful representation and collective voice, we find that though there are organizations like Bharat Krishak Samaj, which is hosting us today, but actually we don't have a lot of voice still in policy making coming from the workers in the agri-food system. So these are just some India level summaries of this for the 6 indicators. As you will see, India is not doing too badly. For an affordable healthy diet, we are more or less near the border. The green bit is the border. The brown is sort of unsustainable as well as unjust. Healthy food environment, we are slightly in the brown, and so on. So I think we are kind of at the borderline. Next, please. And this was just when we plotted the social foundations of the justice, which is in the vertical axis, and the planetary boundary, which is in the horizontal axis. You find very few, only 1% of the world's population is in the bottom right quadrant, which is the safe, healthy, and just space. So 99% are out of this, but as you can see, India is just slightly out of this this safe and just space. So I think a little bit more effort we can get into this quadrant. Next, please. So I would now like to invite my colleague who's online at Cornell, Daniel Maison de Cruz, to present some of the insights from the model.
Thank you for the opportunity to present some of the results of the modeling. And I think one of the strengths of this new report is improvements that we've been able to do methodologically, which has looked at trying to model the consequences of the food system transformation based on a healthy diet, increasing agricultural productivity, and a reduction of food loss and waste. And we did this using 11 different global economic models. And so as we look through some of the results, we'll see distributions or ranges of outcomes. And then that's what we're looking at, is that the different models having somewhat different representations of the food system and somewhat different assumptions along other parameters give us somewhat different outcomes. Can we go to the next slide? And so if we look at some of the results that we see coming out of the modeling for the EAT-Lancet report, one of the key takeaways as we start considering where or what pathway we're on is a business as usual scenario, and in this slide it's the quadrant on the left, is one that we see continuations of increasing consumption and production. And one of the things that I think is interesting in this is that basically across the board, what we're looking at is increasing. So increasing demand for cereals, fruits and vegetables, but also animal source foods. And in general, what we see is not a dramatic change in terms of regions. And so in this slide, we see India's results, and then the little circle is the global results. And so if we're looking at that in general, what we see is that India is growing or projected to grow at a similar rate for most commodities as the global rate for the business as usual. If we can move to the next slide. But if we shift our eyes from that left panel to the right panel, which is one of a projection of a food system that's transformed, aligning towards healthier diets, increased productivity, and reduced food loss and waste, what we tend to see then is quite a bit more variation across sectors and regions, recognizing that different regions have different projections for population and economic growth, have different starting points for diets, and as such have then somewhat different trajectories as a part of an overall transition towards a more sustainable and healthy food system. And in the case for India, what we see is that as opposed to the global average, which sees agriculture increasing by about 8%, India still would need to increase agricultural production, not as much as in the business as usual scenario, but still an increase of over 20% on average. But what we see is a substantial reorientation of what types of commodities would need to be grown. And so we see substantial need for increases in vegetable, fruits, nuts, legumes, and seeds, as aligns with the diet that's been already presented by Nitya a little bit earlier on, as well as an increase for fish, and the possibility for some increases in non-ruminant meat, so a bit of poultry and eggs, where India consumption might increase into the future under an EAT-Lancet aligned food system transformation. But what we see is substantial reductions across ruminant production globally, as well as then all of the types of, and a reduction with cereals, in large part because of a reduced need for animal feed. Next slide. And so the changes that we see for projections for the environment are very much based on the shifting of agricultural production, what's produced, how much is produced. And in that first slide, we saw that business as usual scenario is one of substantial increases in agricultural production. And this comes with substantial increases in pressures towards the environment. An increase globally on land use for agriculture, 4%, a 33% increase on greenhouse gas emissions, mostly driven through land use change and increases in methane emissions from the livestock sector, an increase in blue water use, as well as an increase in application for fertilizers in the way of nitrogen and phosphorus. Next slide. And so globally, this shift towards an EAT-Lancet aligned food system transformation, composed of those three components, the diet, increased productivity, and reduced food loss waste, we see substantial reductions in the pressure towards the environment. We actually get close to the planetary boundaries on land use and greenhouse gas emissions. We're still in the range of increasing risk globally in terms of water use and nitrogen and phosphorus use, but a substantial reduction compared to where we would see with the business as usual, starting to move us in the kind of direction that we need to go. Next slide, please. And so if we look at what do the results that come out of the modeling say for India specifically, what we can see again in that business as usual scenario, which is that first row in this slide, we see substantial increases in the pressures on the environment across those 5 dimensions: land, emissions, water, and fertilizer use. But what we can see is that as we have a food system transformation in that EAT-Lancet scenario, we see substantial reductions across all 5 of those. And in many cases for India, this is moving very similar in terms of directional and magnitude as the global. Highlighting that the areas that we see the biggest challenges still within this kind of a food system transformation continues to be in the space of reducing phosphorus and nitrogen use. And so this is one of those things that we highlighted that's true at the global level as well as at the regional level, that there will likely need to be, in addition to these kinds of transformations, additional investments in ways of increasing specific productivity improvements in terms of fertilizer use, perhaps adopting sustainable intensification practices, as well as trying to incorporate concepts of circularity. One thing that this slide also highlights is that no single individual driver is capable of getting us entirely within a safe space across all of the key environmental dimensions. And so while the diet is very helpful in terms of helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally, it's not as it doesn't contribute as much in terms of reducing fertilizer use, as we still need to increase substantially a range of different commodities like fruits and vegetables to be able to supply an affordable, healthy diet. Increased productivity and reduced food loss waste we see at the global level don't help so much on emissions and agricultural land use, but are very important in terms of helping mitigate prices, and when combined with dietary shifts, can have substantial improvements and can sort of add or magnify some of the benefits that we see across the different dimensions. And next slide, and I think I'm handing it over to the next presenter.
Thanks everyone for being here. So the solutions and transformation chapter stems from the recognition that basically there are many things that we need to transform in our food system to deliver healthy, sustainable and just diets by 2050. And what we asked in these two chapters is the question of, okay, we now know what changes are needed, so how do we actually get there? And next slide. And well, as we can see, we are off target in many, like globally, on many targets. So for example, greenhouse gas emission, agricultural land use, legume production. We all need to sort of shift the kind of workings of our food systems and the ways food is consumed and produced. And next slide. So again, our sort of thinking was framed by the idea of justice, of health, and of sustainability. And we developed a set of 8 key solutions that could help us shift our food system by 2050 towards much more sustainable and healthy trajectories. So here we can see the first right is, of course, the right to food. And so shifting to healthy diets and promoting and protecting traditional diets. Next slide. Then around the right to a healthy environment, which Nitya mentioned before, we have SEI practices, so sustainable and ecological intensification, halting agricultural conversion, and then fiscal and regulatory measures to actually implement food loss and waste. And next slide. And then in terms of justice solutions, we have three key solutions that can help us deliver a just food system. So the first one is securing decent work, then ensuring meaningful representation of all, especially of minorities, and then recognize and protect vulnerable groups. Next slide. So we just looked at what solutions could be more relevant to India based on what was presented so far. It disappeared. Can you go back? And so in terms of shifting healthy diets, for example, a shift in towards healthy diets and less processed or less unhealthy foods is needed by 2050 and is needed urgently. And our systematic reviews reveal that, in fact, a way to ensure that this happens is through taxes and subsidies that are one of the most effective ways to shift consumption patterns. And so, for example, we have the FISAI Eat Right India campaign and the front of package labeling policy that are helping us go towards that here. But again, so I'm giving a few examples of ongoing initiatives in India, and maybe there are more, and my next speakers will hopefully address that. But then I would also like to hear from you what are the actions that we can take and that we are taking to reach these targets. Then, of course, India has an amazing richness in terms of diets and healthy indigenous diets. So protecting and sort of promoting that is extremely important. So millets was already mentioned before, but one notable initiative is the Sri Anna and the National Millet Missions that aim to reintroduce millets as core part of healthy diets. Then in terms of implementation of SEI, well, many efforts are already going on in India, for example, through the National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture and the Paragat Krishni Vikas Yojana, I hope I pronounced that correctly, but basically on organic agriculture. So we say that we are trying to shift consumption, both consumption and production patterns, even though more efforts are needed. And then I think India's efforts are notable in terms of conservation of ecosystems and also of the communities living in these ecosystems. So for example, the mangrove missions National Mangrove Mission and overall all the efforts that have been ongoing for mangroves for the last 20 or 25 years are really a key example of how can we improve and implement climate and disaster resilience in the face of a changing climate. Then in terms of securing decent work, so going towards the justice solution, as Nitya presented, we are doing fairly well. We are just like a little bit by the border, and with some more efforts, we can actually reach a safe and just space. So one of the first and most important thing is, of course, to grant a fair living wages to all. So, for example, the NGRIGA and the NRLM wage floors are really important. Then we have some initiatives as well for women empowerment. So the Lakpati Didi, for example, for like generating more incomes for women. And then in terms of ensuring meaningful choice and representation, so enabling mechanisms for collective actions, we have the 10,000 FPO missions and the Farmer Producing Company Act reform. And then in terms of, and then the last is about the implementation of healthy diets for all, especially children and adolescents. So through the school meal programs that are already to some extent being implemented all across the country. Next slide. So overall, what are the key opportunities for India in the next 25 years? Well, of course, again, shifting towards healthier diets and sort of prioritizing traditionally healthy diets. Through taxes and subsidies, and also through like raising wages again in order to increase affordability of healthy diets will be critical. Then in this, not if there is a sort of domain in which it's not doing so well is food loss and waste. There is still quite a lot of food loss and quite a lot of food waste, and this requires urgent action. And then we have, of course, the protection of ecosystem and communities, especially in climate-affected regions, which is a key priority, especially because we are expecting climate hazards to increase over the next, 20 years, 25 years. We expect much more frequent climate and weather disruptions. And so examples of solutions for this could be, of course, implementing conservation and restoration efforts, for example, as in the case of mangroves, but then also exploring more climate resilience crop and, and ensuring that when we implement this kind of solutions, communities are directly involved and their sort of preferences and knowledge are at the forefront of the actions we try to implement. So, next. So overall, what really did we find? So these are very broad bundles of solutions and actions. And the first thing that I would like to stress and that we really try to explore in the EAT-Lancet is that none of these actions can deliver us a food system transformation by 2050. Rather, we need bundles of different actions that sort of try to guide us towards the final objective. So, for example, we can shift towards more sustainable production system, but then we also have to ensure that living wages are enough so that people can afford a healthy diet, and we have to ensure that the access to these diets is fair and free for all. Then the other thing that I think was really noteworthy of our work is that we sort of acknowledge and also saw through the evidence on different food system transformation intervention that without a broad coalitions of actors, progress is almost impossible because maybe government can lead on one aspect, but then communities might need to lead on another. And again, research will have a critical role to play. So all these actors together need to form alliances and coalitions to drive progress. And well, of course, Ajay mentioned at the starting, like the need to handle corporate power and sort of conflicts of interest with care, especially because India has such a large proportions of smallholders that might be vulnerable to price and market disruptions. And then finally, and some of you might join the workshop on the Food System Countdown Initiative tomorrow, but like the need to monitor and evaluate progress and ensure that it keeps being on track will be critical. So implementing strong monitoring and evaluation system will be a key priority. So next, so that is all, and I will leave the word to, I see?
One of the things as a farmers organization I want to add what India can do is design a good consultation process where you take farmers and stakeholders into confidence that policies and transformation can take. And one of the questions that I think so the next panel can take up when Dr. Ramesh Chandji and ML Jat Sahab are here, we're honored that you're here, Jat Sahab, is that how much of the GE of the greenhouse emissions are coming due to government policies, whether they be on fertilizer subsidy, whether they be on free power, how much of the burden is being put on humanity, on India because of government policies. We'll take question and answers now, but as a farmers organization, I want to add another thing. Nitya, is that when I looked at your charts about where India stands in the whole picture about diets, and we come up not too bad, right? I think we, as a farmers organization, we think we'd come out not too bad, Siraj Hussain Saab, is because we can't afford a more aspirational diet. Aspirational diet of more meat, more eggs, more ultra-processed food. You can't afford all these, what the food processing companies are going to give us. And that's exactly why I think we need a better consultation process. We'll take questions now. Can somebody take the mic around? And if there are any questions. So, sabse pehle, Jat Sahab always has the first question. So, Jat Sahab, I will introduce you, but I'd expect everyone else to introduce themselves. ML Jat Sahab is Director General, Indian Council of Agriculture Research. Really honored that you're here with us. And please remember, you will be in the second panel being asked questions. Please. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ajay ji. First of all, let me compliment you and whole team for this very, very important dialogue. I think this is something critical across the world and more particularly for India. And Nitya ji, congratulations to you and team for this fantastic exercise. I was just curious to understand a bit if you have gone through or the synergies and trade-offs between the justice and the planetary boundaries in relation to sustainable and healthy diet at a meta-scale, meso-scale, and micro-scale in relation to India. I think that's something very, very important for us to understand when we talk about the policies and the programs. We need to understand at the meta-scale, which is fine, but also at the meso and the micro-scale. And I think justice and the planetary boundary, they certainly got some trade-offs, some synergies in relation to the sustainable and healthy diets.
So, should we just take a few?
We can take a few.
So, next, aapka ek question. Please introduce yourself. You can keep sitting, but you can introduce yourself definitely. You want to stand, you can stand.
No, that's fine. My name is Saurabindo. Thanks for
So, you are with?
I work with a Dutch NGO and I'm a consultant as well. Okay. I've been retained by them for convening and partnerships. Phenomenal work done by the Commission. I would, building on the question of the DG Saab has asked, I would love to hear more about the justice, equity, human rights, and some examples out there, especially in case of India, because we have a lot of marginal and smallholders farmer. We must be very candid and outspoken on that in the report. That's one part. The second part, while I was eating my lunch and khichdi in the afternoon, I was wondering that it's such a mammoth work globally that has been undertaken. In context to India, out of 10 billion, we represent 1.4 billion, right? So how are the key pathways for operationalizing it in India, right? We saw some broad contours and brush strokes that were there. Of course, they are there. Where does the funding comes from? Where does the structure comes from? Which are the systems that will be building on that? Especially when for sustainable production and consumption, SDG 12, We are reporting. Fortunately, we are one of the countries who's reporting and progressing. Kudos to India for that. But our indicators and KPIs are not aligned. We are not reporting on 12.7, the sustainable procurement. Government is doing that, but not publicly reporting on that. So keeping that in the light, how does this shift work?
Good. So
Thanks.
we'll take one more question, but definitely, you have a question? You have a question.
Thank you. I am Kuldeep Sharma. I come from dairy space.
Can you speak up a little louder?
Yeah, I am Kuldeep Sharma and I come from dairy space, working in that area. I have two questions. One for Professor Ramanan, and this is regarding when you mentioned that there are two new entities being added, pesticides and antibiotics. I just wanted to check, are you considering aflatoxins also, which is a big challenge for food nowadays? My second question is, I can't see Daniel.
Daniel is there online, so you can just
Okay,
speak up for him.
Okay. So in his modeling, somewhere he showed the comparison of India with business as usual at a global level. I found that in wheat and particularly in sugar, we have outperformed the global level, and in wheat we are very close by. So how should we in India read it? Is it good? Or what should be the strategy if suppose we have to somewhere counter it? Thank you.
So I think so we'll just answer this. Can we go to Daniel first? Daniel, can you hear us?
So I'll just
Yeah.
repeat the question for Daniel. He couldn't hear very well. So Daniel, maybe we'll go to you first. There were
Daniel, are you online?
Yes,
Okay. So
I'm online.
Nitya's repeating the question for you.
Could you hear me, Daniel?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So the first question was that the trade-offs between justice and other bits in terms of healthy diets as well as planetary boundaries. Could we say a little bit more using some example about how this trade-off works? And I was wondering if you could talk about the price and affordability trade-off, and I'll talk about the labor trade-off. And the second question, Daniel, was really your last slide for India in terms of the two scenarios, the business as usual and the EAT-Lancet scenario, 2050. That was it, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference between
Daniel,
the
the
two?
floor is yours.
All right. I think it's a really good question with respect to trade-offs because as is almost always the case whenever we have multiple objectives, then it's always a challenge to be able to make progress towards all of them. And one of the things that we did see was that a dietary shift, if attempted on its own, in many regions, including in India, could potentially lead to higher food prices, in large part because in India's case, you're already starting from a starting point of relatively low consumption of animal source foods. And so in other regions, what we saw was when you had a shift towards a healthy diet, that there was compensating effects. You reduced your consumption of expensive animal source foods, and that compensated for the increasing need to consume more fruits and vegetables, which can be relatively expensive compared to, say, staples. But what we saw in the Indian case is that already starting from a low starting point in terms of consumption of animal source foods, there was no compensating effect. And so needing to increase fruits, vegetables, and legume consumption in India to sort of achieve those recommended diet could lead to then increasing prices. And so this is where we saw it was really important to have a bundle of different types of solutions where with increasing productivity and reducing food loss waste played a really important job of helping to mitigate some of those price increases. But even so, without additional interventions like those highlighted by Costanza in terms of price supports for fruits and vegetables and subsidies and investments in improving practices around some of the healthy foods, there could certainly be a potential challenge in terms of making sure that a healthy diet is affordable for everyone. And so I think there certainly is that potential tension and where there will be a critical need for additional interventions and investments to ensure that kind of a transition can happen. with respect to the, Nitya, could you help me with respect to the second question with the EAT-Lancet and the business as usual? What was the question?
With reference to EAT-Lancet? Sugar. So the question is that with reference to sugar and wheat, India seems to be exceeding the very close or exceeding. So we have with us Dr. Ramesh Chandji. Thank you so much. Please, thank you. So we're doing the question answer session. So Daniel, for you, the question was that with regard to sugar and wheat, we're very close to the planetary boundaries. And what is the question then?
In that particular case, sugar and wheat both are the products where we are outperforming. Is it a risk for India when we talk of?
So is there risk for India because we are outperforming the planetary, not performing actually, we are underperforming. That's what you're saying?
We are outperforming.
Yeah.
Outperforming
So
is the word.
that's a challenging question because, of course, India is part of sort of the global food system, and so what are the contributions of production? And so there's a bit of two pieces, right? So there's whether or not India is over-consuming these commodities and whether it's producing more of these than would be required. And so in general, I think as in many regions, the recommendation is try to find ways to reduce the consumption of added sugars. And so in that respect, that's certainly one of those groups, along with some of the animal source foods, that we see basically in all regions a pretty clear recommendation to try to reduce consumption, and then that has a consequence of reducing production. With respect to wheat, that one's one where it's a little bit more of a rebalancing in terms of this. So if we think about how critical a diverse diet is for healthy outcomes. And so in many cases, what we need is we're trying to hit this sweet spot from the diets. And so it's not just a matter of increasing or decreasing food groups, it's about also making sure that we're hitting energy targets. And so because of that, there may be a bit of a reduction in terms of how much is coming from staples to then allow for an increased consumption of fruits and vegetables and legumes without pushing into to overconsumption on the calorie front. Wheat is also in some regions an important feed stock, and so that's also, as we have fewer animals in the food systems, then there would also then just be decreased demand for many different cereals in terms of not needing to have as many animals to feed. So there's multiple factors coming in there when we're looking at those different figures in terms of the specifics for India. So I wouldn't say that necessarily India is at any particular concern with the wheat and production from what we see. It's just that given all of the other pieces that we're looking at, that may be one of those sectors that might be not growing as much in an EAT-Lancet world or even reducing a bit.
Thank you for that. So Nitya, anyone else wants to answer some quick answers so we can get more questions?
Very quickly, I think on the trade-off question, justice trade-off, so I think there are many dimensions of it. Daniel has just mentioned about the price and the affordability of fruits and vegetables might be higher, so how do we give price support to enable the poorest to afford these? The second one could be labor. I think overall the modeling shows that the agriculture production or land has to come down, though fruits and vegetables will increase. So this would mean some extent of labor redeployment. This is already happening. As you said, with a lot of the small and marginal farmers, many are becoming migrant workers. So there are other kinds of problems in terms of wages, minimum wages, enforcement of law, and so on. So these are some of the trade-offs actually for which we do need either social protection or some of the solutions that Costanza mentioned, but also looking for solutions together as a collective within the Indian context. I'll hand over to Ramanan for the environment question.
Novel entities. So first I'd respond to, I think Ajay, you asked a question about things like fertilizer subsidies, and I think those are opportunities for redirection. We didn't actually compute the part of the carbon that comes from direct government policies, but certainly, this is a worthwhile exercise and it's worth thinking about to say, you don't have to, you can redirect the subsidy in some other way that helps the farmer. It doesn't have to be taken away from the ag sector, but certainly given that it distorts choices of what people grow and how they use fertilizers, and certainly comes in the way of moving to these other sorts of systems that we're talking about, which is of nitrogen fixation through intercropping and things like that, then we're sort of, we're fighting this battle with one arm tied behind our back, and that's not a good thing. On the question on the novel entities, no, we didn't do aflatoxins because this is really about things that we're using in the system as inputs that then contribute to breaching planetary boundaries. So that is a outcome. So I see Dr. JPS Gill is there, and he and I have worked for many years on antibiotics in Punjab, for instance, and he'll tell you, how bad the situation is where all farmers, just to keep their chickens alive, are providing antibiotics to poultry, only because that's the only way in which they can actually continue to, carry out raising of chickens. So unless we're able to find alternatives for them, vaccination and so forth, we won't be able to solve these problems.
Thank you. So we'll take a few questions, and I suggest one question per person. We'll start with just one question each. First at the back. And just one question because there's not enough time for too many questions.
Sir, I am Dr. R.B. Tiwari from ICR IIHR Bangalore, Indian Institute of Horticulture Research Bangalore. For any food system, nutrition or anything, we look towards the fruits and vegetables. I have quick questions.
One question.
Yeah, the fruit vegetable production does mean more availability. More production, does it mean more availability, especially in the absence of post-harvest and processing infrastructure? Number one. Number two, if we want to give a matching infrastructure, post-harvest infrastructure, it is going to demand water and power. How we are going to have a sustainable way of managing the increased water and power requirement and turning post-harvest management from the to the sustainable post-harvest management?
Okay.
That is my question.
Next. I'll answer that question because how are you going to get water and power? I think so Lancet can't answer, but I'll answer that as a farmers organization.
Yeah, sure.
So your question, please.
So my name is Jakhar Singh Kocher, and we are a research organization, and we are working on nanobubble technology for irrigation purposes. And the link which I am trying to establish here, when you have so much of consumption of chemical in production, how can we talk about healthy food production? So where is that missing link that we need to establish? I'm just giving you a small example in a minute. Punjab was using only 500 ton during 1960s. Urea.
Speak up into the mic and be quick.
Yeah, urea consumption was 500 ton. Now we are consuming 1 lakh ton of urea for the same production. I mean, a little bit of more production. So this movement from natural farming to the urea-led production, this whole has led to the water table going down, the whole ecosystem going bad.
What's the question?
So my question is, this whole movement which has already happened, there are science which can help to reverse this whole cycle. That's where we can go back to the natural farming. Is that area need to be really looked at, the scientific intervention for this. Yeah.
Thank you. So we just go back, right at the back. Udhar le jaye. But by the time you come to that question, I really think that question on water and power consumption, it's more to do with the second panel where the policymakers are than to do with people now representing EAT. Ma'am, please, your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Ajay. I'm Rajeshwari. I teach in Shiv Nadar University, and I actually teach this 2019 EAT-Lancet Commission. And, I'm a little, well, let's say, puzzled about the modeling exercise itself, because there are two overarching planetary Earth systems, climate change and biosphere integrity, biodiversity, which, well, are overarching and include the other planetary systems, right? So agriculture is the one, well, let's say the least significant sector in terms of the economy, right? At least in development economics theory, we've been told that as countries develop, agriculture should decline in the share in the economy and the workforce should also decline. So it's theoretically, it's foreordained to decline, and it is causing them, well, it's violated, the one sector that has violated 6 out of 9 sacrosanct planetary boundaries. My question is specifically about how we reconcile this, that is the development teachings that we have and the biophysical degradation that we're facing from this one, well, meant to be or ought to be insignificant sector. Is that included in the model at all?
So can I ask a question also? I have a question. Okay. I have a question to you, Sumati. What is the impact of planetary health diet on nutrition? So I think let's ask her to answer first, right? So can you just pass on the...
Yeah, I'll just pass on to Sumati, and just to say for you, Daniel, that there was one question on the growth paradigm, which is expected that agriculture will decline as countries and economies grow. But at the same time, agriculture here, agri-food systems contribute a lot to the transgression of the planetary health boundaries. So how do we reconcile the development trajectory with the agri-food system progression? But I'll hand over to Sumati first.
Thank you, Ajay, for that question. And I know we didn't have enough time to talk about nutrition here, but I would say nutrition is very central to the landscape of healthy and sustainable food systems, especially in India. So I can give you a very brief gist of what we found in our analysis. We found that if we shift to the planetary health diet, we do see improvements in nutritional adequacy in most of the key nutrients. But there will be a couple of nutrients, for example, iron, vitamin B12, which are of concern always, especially for specific population groups. What we then found was if we optimize the PhD, where we know that the PhD is not one size fits all. There are different variants which has moderate amount of animal foods. There are vegetarians, vegans. So based on that, for specific population groups, for example, if there are pregnant women, if we increase legume intake and we increase the intake of green leafy vegetables, there are specific optimizations within the diets. We are able to meet these nutritional requirements. But we recognize this is not always possible, and that is why we do also support other public health interventions. And we also know that diet only plays one of the major roles in nutritional deficiency, and we have other factors such as infections quite prevalent in India. So we do recommend, along with diet, there are public health interventions that play a key role.
Thank you. You want to come to Daniel? No, Nitya, please. Yeah, Ramanan.
I'm just going to be very brief, sir, in response to your question. There was a review that was done as part of this exercise, which looked at environmentally sustainable methods of agriculture. There's a big myth out there that adopting these, results in yield losses. And what that review found, which is, I think it's published in Nature Food, found that yes, there is for 2 or 3 years, but then it recovers. So a big question is not about teaching the natural farming, it is for someone to bear the expense of that transition. Someone is going to pay for that transition because it can't be the farmer. And I think on the cold chain, we did this for vaccines a long time ago. I think we have cold chain for potatoes. The National Cold Chain Mission also, apart private sector has ice cream, major cold chain, but actually nothing beats, I think we have in the public sector for vaccines, but really nothing of the kind that you're talking about. It's an absolute need. But there is a mission on this. I don't know how far it has gotten in India, but that's about.
Thank you.
Daniel,
can we move to you? Can you answer? Can you hear us? Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. Could you, so this was with respect to the economic significance of the food system? Is that the question I should answer?
Yes, because with economic development, the share of the agriculture and agri-food sector to the economy is going down. At the same time, the modeling shows that the food system almost remains the same.
Yeah, no, I think this is one of those, again, where it's a bit of this, like, how do we balance all of these multiple objectives? So from an environmental perspective, the food system, even if it is a relatively small sector globally, is still the largest user of land and water and for agrochemicals. And so along these environmental dimensions, even if as an overall in terms of contribution to sort of gross domestic product, in terms of that. It may be a declining or a sector that's falling within its sort of overall share of the economy. It's still a major driver. And in many cases, what we see with the projections in 2050 is even though the share is declining, that doesn't mean the sector is becoming smaller, right? It means that other sectors are growing faster. And so if we are already putting pressure on the environment, even if as a sector it might be declining in share, it might still be increasing overall. And so that's one aspect that we need to consider in terms of the environmental consequences. Absolutely correct that from an emissions perspective, the food system is not the primary contributor to emissions, but it's also important to recognize that even if we were able to magically get every other sector that's a bigger contributor to emissions down to zero, we wouldn't achieve the environmental targets of 1.5 degree warming without having some reductions on emissions from the food system, which currently contribute, depending on what you include, anywhere from about 20% to about a third of anthropogenic emissions are coming from this food system. And so it's one of these where definitely from an environmental perspective, really important to find ways to improve it. But the challenge, I think, with the trade-offs is as the sector becomes somewhat smaller, it might be a challenge to get the kind of resources that we need to have the attention to make the kinds of improvements that we'll need. It's not just a demand side change on the diet. We do need to have investments, interventions to improve productivity, to improve production practices and the adoption of new techniques. And so I think the person who asked that question, I think you're highlighting, I think, an important tension that we'll have to intentionally work with, because we do need to have additional interventions on the supply side. Some of this for the justice, to kind of reallocate labor, to help transition, and so that the cost of these transitions aren't borne by the most vulnerable. But certainly we're going to have to be working with that, and I think it will be one of the challenges with respect to achieving such a transformation. Hopefully I answered that question. It's a little hard for me to hear with the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are running short of time. Ramesh Chandni, I apologize. We are 10 minutes late, and really nice. Thank you for the commissioners and the panel and the authors to be here with us. Thank you. Let's give them a round of thanks. Thank you so much. They will be here for dinner, and if you stay back for dinner, you'll be able to ask more questions. You can do charcha